I believe we're live, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Business of Property on Property Development Australia. We have a star-studded audience today and also guests here. We've got some agents across the major cities of Australia, and thank you so much all for being here. Everyone, I'm just going to give everyone a few more minutes to hop into the Zoom chat room. And also those in Facebook land, hello there. Thank you for joining us. And so what we've invited these gentlemen here who are star agents in each of their major cities. We have Cam from Melbourne, we have Daniel from Brisbane, Arvin and Navin, and from Sydney and from Perth. And the reason why we've invited all of you is to be able to get an idea of what's happening in your cities, and like I said, it's an open sort of Q&A, and I'm just going to facilitate some questions here. But before we dive into that, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves, your agencies, what it is that your agency focuses on, whether it's developments, whether it's commercial, residential. Love to get to know you a little bit more. So I'm going to start off. I said I would start off alphabetically, which is A for Arvin and Navin.
All right.
Go ahead.
So Navin and I work for our own company called Gin Commercial.
I think you guys might be a little bit too close. So, okay. Excellent.
We'll put Navin on mute for the time being. How about that?
Sorry, Navin.
Yeah, so we run our own company called Vin Commercial. We predominantly focus on the sale and acquisition of development sites across the Sydney metro regions. In particular, we sell predominantly across the lower and upper North Shore regions. So for us as a team, we've transacted over $170 million so far. And subsequently, we've opened our own business during COVID, which is interesting. But we've had, some more success there. So we're happy to share our story and what's sort of happening on the ground from that perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I've known you and Navin for a few years now, and to be able to see sort of your new brand come up, and like I said, during a time which is quite interesting, but be thriving as well is really, really cool to see. Love to hear more of that story and what's happening in the Sydney market. So I'll just keep going around. Cam, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Hey, I'm Cam, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My company's the Avenue Property Co, based in Melbourne. So we could be called At Home Melbourne at the moment because we don't get to go anywhere these days. But look, yeah, we specialise in sort of your small to medium development sites, mainly townhouse sites. We've got a few subdivisions on the go as well as a company. So, and then we end up working for those developers and just sell to the end user as well.
Excellent. So, be keen to hear what's happening or what's not happening in Melbourne.
A lot happening actually, which is a good thing. So
I think there's there are people out there. Definitely, there's a transactions happening. They can see them, so it'd be cool to see what sort and where they're happening.
There's definitely a sort.
Cool.
Yeah.
Daniel, over to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. So I'm out of Brisbane. 1% Property is my company. I got my start in real estate, really doing property developments, and moved from that. I saw a bit of a gap in the area I was operating in regards to a agency that delivers a very high service at a reasonable price. So 1% Property has been running just under a year in September, and absolutely loving it. It's going very well, and really enjoy selling in the area of Brisbane I sell in. I focus in the inner north area, specifically Kedron and the surrounding suburbs, which is just an absolutely fantastic area. Really big things happening there. So it's lots of positives.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for being here. And YouTube star Kent, I was going to say is from Perth, but really because you're in YouTube land, it's all across Australia and the globe. So tell us a little bit about your history and where you're from, Kent.
Yeah, look, my background's a buyer's agent. I've been in the industry over a decade. I've been the youngest inductee into the REIA Hall of Fame under buyer's agency. I won the Australian Buyer's Agent of the Year 3 years in a row, but I gave it up quite a few years ago to do my own thing, primarily with in property development with family offices and high net worth investors, where I go around and put little deals together, mainly infill residential development, a bit of commercial stuff that we are looking at. So it really depends where there's an opportunity. Perth Market isn't as big as the East Coast. So fortunately, we have to look at a whole range of different things to find opportunities. And but that's all separate to why I'm on YouTube. I set the channel up now during lockdown, probably about 6 months ago, and it was just to focus on providing genuine free property advice. There's no course, there's no upsell, there's no service. I don't really go out and solicit it for a service now or anything. It's just to educate people across Australia, because there's not a lot of content on Australian property. And I thought that is something that people would like to know a little bit more about from someone who's got a bit of runs on the board.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I've seen your videos, and as you say, it's great to be able to have people just provide that free value. So thanks, and great to be able to hear what's happening in the Perth market as well. Cool. All right, let's start again. We're going to do a bit of a roundtable. Tell us the Vins. I'm going to call Arvin and Navin the Vins. What is happening in the Sydney market? What's happened over the last, 4 months COVID times? And what are people buying? Because you guys are transacting and not just small numbers, like fairly chunky projects as well.
Sure. I mean, look, we launched during the COVID time, as you know, so we kind of had no choice but to continue what we were doing from our previous employer and really push on and get on out there. So for us, there was a little bit of uncertainty during the initial couple of months, which I think was uncertainty for everybody out there at that time. But for us, we decided to, rather than take on sites and push them out to multiple developers, we decided to see who was actually transacting in the market, who was there willing to do business, because there's quite a lot of interested parties out there, but there's not really a lot of buyers, which we found. So we were strategically putting certain sites with certain developers, and that strategy really worked well for us. So Sydney market, we think it's still good, it's still strong, and the developers that have been there for a number of years are still there and active, whereas the groups that have come sort of into the market and then out are pretty much sitting on the sidelines at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And what have you guys been, transacting and seeing that there's still an appetite for?
At this time, we're selling predominantly our sites within the lower and upper North Shore. And since the time we opened, which is about 4 months' time, we were able to transact around $43 million of development side within Greenwich, Willoughby, and Northbridge areas, and also Chatswood. And we're quite pleased. And like Arvin said, we were able to match the right property with the right developer, and that worked quite well for us.
Sorry about that. And so you were saying still strong activity in that lower North Shore area.
It is. There's still there's a clear lack of development sites in that marketplace, and regardless of where the market is heading, those developers and builders, we have the team. They got to keep on going because they have a team. They have to keep them. So they are trying to focus more on a boutique project.
Oops, that's coming back again.
And trying to give that point of difference to the new buyers at the moment.
Okay, and who are they catering to? Like, what sort of, are they the downsizers? I mean, and what sort of stock? Is it townhouses or units that you're looking for?
Look, for us, townhouses are consistently sought after by developers at the moment. So the townhouse market is good because traditionally larger homeowners across the regions that we work in are homes of quite a high cost. The downsizers there that are looking to retain size, but encompass a bit of a saving from where they are. So townhouses are predominantly what we're doing. Thinking about the stock that we've sold, actually, it's all townhouse size. So you would say that that's the cream of the crop at the moment. But again, boutique development size, apartments, 10, 20 units. The larger scale developers that traditionally would look over 100 are looking for smaller opportunities now, because we're just putting that down to the uncertainty as well. Wanting to have something secure in areas that are, I guess, established, not new growth areas, and something where they can keep their, as Navin mentioned earlier, their teams running. Because if we look at it strategically, they can't really just stop doing what they're doing because COVID's there. And as you know, Cheryl, they work to traditionally a 24 to 34, 2-month time scale from conception through to completion. So we would hope by then that COVID would be behind us. Well, that's what we're collectively thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move over to Cam, and we talked about, it sounds like townhouses as well in Melbourne. There's a bit of a sweet spot there too.
Yeah, probably townhouses definitely, but the land subdivisions have been really popular now with house and land packages. The home builder grant, the 25,000 home builder grant, has been really, really, I guess, a good thing for Melbourne. And yeah, we've been able to obviously provide, quite a few options as far as house and land, a few different estates that we're working on, as well as some townhouse sites as well. So this is to the end user, obviously.
Yeah. And so that's so you're selling the end product, and typically are they first home buyers?
At the moment, I'd say they're pretty much 75 to 80% of first home buyers or the downsizers. Is what I'm finding. Investors are sort of a little bit on the quieter side, a little bit. But I guess where we're probably seeing the success as far as the end user sales are concerned is that it's not an established home, which means they don't need to go and see it, or they can't go and see it. So obviously us being in lockdown at the moment, and for a lot of agencies that are sort of really focused on that established home sales, I can really see where it might be going through some really sort of tough times, just because of that fact. Whereas, with what we've got, fortunately, we're I guess in a good position where, we send out plans and we send out, inclusion lists and speak on the phone, on Zooms and emails, and that's pretty much all we can do. So
yeah. So did you find, like, when you guys went into lockdown a good 3-4 weeks ago, was there a noticeable sort of change, halt? How did it sort of impact?
It was quite interesting. Probably the first week and a half, it was like REA just completely stopped. We weren't getting anything through REA. There was a couple of other sort of things like social media that where we were still getting quite a few inquiries. And then I think once those numbers started to drop a little bit, as far as the cases, obviously the deaths unfortunately are still sort of sitting around that, the high teens. But once the cases started dropping, then we found that the inquiries sort of started picking up again. So people sort of probably just got that confidence back, that they can sort of see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And so have you seen, like, over the last 6 months, has it been fairly consistent that people are still buying, or the fact that there were all these sort of handouts that it sort of peaked as well? What's that been like?
I definitely think that the handouts have helped. There's no doubt about it. So, as far as what we do specifically, without the 25,000, I think it would have been a lot tougher.
Okay.
So a lot of people are taking that into consideration. Fortunately, our developers are not adding 25,000.
Yes.
You know, so that's obviously a positive. They're actually, you know, we're able to keep the prices where they are. So there is a, you know, that genuine sort of saving.
Yeah, good stuff. And
Yeah.
so how far out of the city are these?
Look, where we're sort of having probably the most success, because it is that first home buyer, you're probably looking at it, you know, that's really the southeastern suburbs. So our office is in Cheltenham, which is sort of Bayside, and then we've got quite a few development sites and land subs out in sort of the Cranbournes and Pakenhams, Dandenongs, Frankston areas at the moment. That's sort of, you know, the last sort of couple of months. That's really where it's all been focusing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. So people that are still got decent jobs can have some serviceability, are just taking
Spot on.
advantage of all of that. Cool. I'm going to jump over to Brisbane. That's so good. I'm traveling around Australia without even having to go anywhere. Daniel, what's happening in the Brisbane market?
Hi, Cheryl. So I guess the first point is in Brisbane, there's two really distinct markets, and that's the apartment and the housing market. They're doing very different things. Apartments in Brisbane, I'm sure everyone's read articles, have had a really, really tough run for a few years because essentially they approved way too many. There were about 25,000 that all came online in the course of about 12 months. And it's still working through that glut of just oversupply at the moment. So I don't focus too much on apartments. So I'll talk more about houses, which are really the polar opposite. The housing market in Brisbane is really surprisingly strong at the moment. So I'll talk you through what happened with COVID during the first sort of few weeks. Probably similar to what Cam said. Everything just went really, really quiet. We had a lot of vendors pulling their properties off the market because they were really concerned that they weren't going to sell. I actually launched one property in Kedron, my target suburb, on the Thursday, and they announced the lockdown on the Friday, which was a bit unfortunate. But we had about 4 weeks of basically nothing. And then on the fifth week, we had 20 odd groups through, two offers, and sold it for 42 grand above the asking price. So that's a real illustration of what's happened in Brisbane. It went down quite significantly. I mean, if you look at the activity levels in the state, it dropped down to about 400 sales across Queensland, and it's now back up to just under 1,200. So it dropped down quite a lot, and it came back with force. So it's looking quite good now.
Excellent, because you're I mean, unlike what Cam was saying, you're working on the established house market there. So have you found, I mean, apart from the initial sort of uncertainty and everyone just going, we have no idea what this is and what's happening, has it really impacted sort of buyers in terms of what they're buying and how much they're paying for, and that serviceability side of things?
Honestly, it really, really surprised me. Just not at all. The one thing that's been affected is that obviously it's the search criteria is changing a little bit. I think the search criteria for granny flat and home offices went up by about 800%. From a Domain article I read during COVID. So obviously there's changes in what people are looking for. But as far as the inner north area of Brisbane goes, I mean, personally, in the last month, I've broken 3 suburb records, and you know, prices are going from strength to strength. Things are selling very, very quickly. I've had a couple of properties sell in 6 days, 7 days, 4 offers on the table after, you know, 1 open home. It's really surprising. And the thing is, a lot of vendors are still sitting there with the impression that it's a bad market, which means they're not listing their properties. And it's just adding to the problem of too many buyers and not enough properties on the market. So very, very surprising, but the Brisbane market is actually, it's quite strong.
Yeah, and your buyers typically, because it's an established home, are they, you know, are they downsizers? Are they your, you know, young families? Do they have specific sort of demographic that you're?
Honestly, all shapes and sizes. Being an independent agency, obviously I target on the inner north area, but I do sell a few outside of that area as well.
Mhm.
So a lot of young families. Again, it depends what the property looks like. So if it's an apartment, it might be a young couple or a single person. If it's a townhouse, or then it goes through to like the higher end houses around the $1 million. The scope of my buyer, yeah, it really all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, the really reassuring to hear that, particularly, that it hasn't really affected it that much.
And I mean, if you look at prices, there was a slight drop in price in Brisbane houses over COVID, but Brisbane property prices are up 3.8% this calendar year.
Yeah.
Our auction clearance rates, coming in at 50-60%, which is quite low compared to Sydney and Melbourne. But if you look at it year on year to this time last year in Brisbane, they were like 30-35%. So by every factor that you could sort of look at, the property market is strong. Now, I don't know if that's going to last. Obviously, it would really depend on what happens, whether we get a second wave or, if businesses can continue to reopen and that sort of thing. But at the moment, it's sort of bucking the trend a bit.
So are you finding then that vendors that are putting their properties on the market, are they doing that because they feel that they're going to get great prices, or are they doing that because they're actually quite uncertain about the market and they just want to sell now?
I don't think anyone's sort of under the illusion that prices are very stable, but they're not skyrocketing. They're strong, but again, I feel the sentiment among buyers and sellers is very sort of normal, as in sellers are selling because they need to. There's not really, that I've experienced, any fire sales. I'm sure it's happening, but very, very few and far between. There's the occasional buyer that comes in and offers, $200,000 lower than the asking price. But other than that, it's a very normal but strong market.
Excellent. Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Daniel. Over to you in Perth, Kent. What's happening in good old Perth?
Well, 2020 was the year that Perth was going to recover, wasn't it? It was 6 years of very depressing times here in WA, and I used to hear it every time, have a laugh when an article come up and people used to say, "Oh, this year it's going to improve," and it just never happened. But 2020 did shape up to be a good year, or is shaping up. I mean, we had residential vacancy rate. I pulled some stats because I thought, I'll prepare something. But in January, Feb, residential vacancy rate was 2.5% in Perth. We had some of the highest transaction volume, I believe. The July transaction volume, which is about 3 months prior, in terms of contracts, was up 12% on the month and 9% this time last year. We have about 10,500 listings on the market. To give you an idea, a balanced market's about 12,500. So again, a buyer's market, a seller's market, and then COVID hit, and there was a little bit of a slowdown. I think it was very short for us. We're talking probably 2 or 3 weeks. Our case numbers came down pretty quick. And if anything, it's probably put a bit of fuel on the fire for West Australia in terms of what's happening. A couple of drivers of that have been primarily the fly and fly industry has told a lot of East Coast workers they needed to relocate across to Western Australia. That's put further pressure down on our residential vacancy rate. We're down at about 1.66% now, which is all-time low. I think it's 2008 was the last time that's happened, which is 2 mining booms ago, which is crazy. We've seen increase in volume in terms of buyers on the ground now. Anecdotally, that data won't come through for another 2 or 3 months, but speaking to quite a few agents I talk to, now there's also some really quirky things that are happening in WA, all regional property. Those markets have seen a massive amount of buyer activity, low levels of stock. So regions like Margaret River to the south, 2.5 hours south of Perth, pretty prominent holiday region. A lot of the properties there have just been sold or contracted, not a lot of volume. And in the city, there's not a lot of volume coming to the market. So my feeling on the ground is, look, COVID was a bit of a speed bump, but that's not to say we're going to improve. It's 6 years of hard times, and we're just coming back to a stabilisation period for the Perth market.
Yes. So what do you find? I mean, the buyers that are starting to purchase, owner occupiers. Are there some investors that are starting to fuel things as well?
Yeah, I think I did talk about this on one of my videos, Perth Market, and it's actually it's called the baby boomer kids is what I like to think of it. So 25 to 30 is that age group of baby boomer kids, which is a population wave. Over the last 5 years in Perth, all those baby boomer kids have deferred purchases, like first home buyers has been really low. And consequently, now we've had lockdown and they've had, say, 3, 4, 6 weeks living at home with their parents and nothing else. And they've gone, well, I've been holding off because the market's not improving. Now I'm gonna actually go out and buy something. And different to that, well, similar to the East Coast, the WA government has thrown a lot of money at stimulus. We have an extra 20 grand on top of the 25 federal government. So for a first home buyer in WA, you're getting $65,000 to build a house. Now, I know some blocks of land, 80 minutes, say 60 minutes out of the city or 40 minutes out of the city, you can buy for 100 grand. So basically you're paying for the house and getting the land for free. And that's pretty compelling when the rental return on that might be gross 10+% once you take away the grant money, but from the cost base. So yeah, there's a lot of incentive there for first home buyers to come into the market. But I really think it was an actual structural change in living at home and thinking, well, this is time. And speaking to people on the ground, a bit younger than me, talking to them, yeah, they are buying purely because of lockdown. They don't want to live with roommates anymore. They don't want to live with their parents anymore. They think, well, geez, I've held back for 5 years. I may as well move into the market. And I think it's smart. I mean, smart buying. You're buying at the bottom of the cycle for West Australia.
And so you mentioned gross rental yields of 10.
Yeah, I'm not. Sorry, I'll caveat that with when you take off the grant money off the cost base. So
yeah.
So yeah, so the 65 grand, you're basically getting say $350 a week on a 200 grand house. Roughly is kind of the numbers that you're talking there for someone who's a FOG and can move out in 6 months after they've lived in it, claimed their first homeowners grant and moved on. So not suggesting you do that. The grants are there because they want you to live in the homes. But if that was to happen, that's the type of yields in some of those markets a bit further out of the city.
And so how far out of the city are you talking about?
About 40 minutes there. You do have to be careful. Different to what Cameron said, I was doing some market research on some land subdivisions about 40 minutes out in Bullsbrook, which is an example. They've just connected a main freeway up there to the city, and they were selling, say, 350 square metre lots for roughly, I think 120, 130 plus incentives. So like net that back to say 110 with some incentives chucked in. Over 2 weekends, they sold out of their entire subdivision, and those same lots that were selling 2 or 3 months ago at 120 were all getting contracted at 150 with no incentives because the prices change and the stages change. But this is what I was looking at RP data. And the builders have removed all incentives in the West Australian market. So no incentives for buyers in that first home owners grant. And there's been, 2 to 3% price rise across builders. So you got to be careful of where you're buying, because that 65 grand when you do the maths and add it back has been quickly eaten up by the fact that it's not the developers being opportunistic or the builders being opportunistic. It's the fact that the market hasn't had supply for 5 years. And because this stimulus is only ending in a couple of months' time, there's no stock there. I can't get a project out of the ground and selling by the time that the grant money all ends in December. So it's effectively forcing people to buy, which is creating a bit of a supply bottleneck. And, you've got to pay if you want to get your building on site effectively. We don't have enough trades. We don't have enough people. So it's an interesting market and positive, because I think that, I did say with the macro level, the mining boom, when you look at the global governments with stimulus in Australia and across the world, that money flows to base commodities. Base commodities generally get mined in Western Australia. So it's great for iron ore price. You've got Fortescue paying an extra dividend. I heard the other day you've got them paying bonuses to their employees. So I think that this will lead to employment in the state, which flows into property. So I think there is some positive light at the end of the tunnel.
Fantastic. And that affordability there as well is, I mean, obviously huge in terms of being able to draw out-of-state buyers as well. That's those sort of numbers. But are they, and just clarify for me, are out-of-state buyers allowed to take advantage of any of those grants?
Yes and no. So short answer is no, unless you're willing to move here. So if you move here and reside here, then yeah, you're fine. The requirement is that you live in the property and reside in the property. So similar to a first homeowners grant, you need to live there for 6 months. They haven't brought out the clarification rules. I assume they have. I haven't actually. I lie. I haven't researched past the point of when they announced it. I'm assuming it will be similar to the first homeowners grant where you've got to live in it for 6 months. But yeah, you have to live there. At the time, they didn't say there was a 6-month minimum stay, but it seems silly to me that the government wouldn't mandate it the same as a first home buyers grant. And the interesting one about the West Australian one is it's not means tested. So for example, the federal one, there's a $750 limit in terms of the build plus contract price. In Western Australia for a build for the 20 grand grant, still for the federal, you got that means test, but for the 20 grand grant, it's not means tested. So you could have it at $1 million home. Not that it would even touch the sides of a variation, but you can, it's not means tested like the other ones.
Yeah, good to know. So for developers now, what are the opportunities there for, obviously those that are currently developing and are on their way to being registered and all that, they're happy. But what are you finding that the current developers who are entering the Perth market or starting up new developments, what are they rolling out? Yeah,
I mean, I think that it's quite a good market in the sense that it is stabilized. I have noticed over the last year or two that the price declines have genuinely stabilized in the inner market. So I'm talking ring sub 20 kilometers of the CBD. So your infill areas effectively. And that's actually good for a developer because you don't want a market that's running too hot. Effectively, it will come to an end at some point. You don't want a market going backwards because for every year you put in the project, you're losing 2 or 3% on the end value. So looking at those established markets, finding infill projects is where I've been seeing opportunities. There is a lot of rezoning in Western Australia. So if you're not familiar with the Golden Triangle, as they call it, which is effectively the city to the coast, all of the million-plus suburbs, they've just done a scheme rezoning in there that's never been done. And I don't know, that land would have been chopped up over 100, 150 years ago. So you got 2,000 square metre blocks now you can put apartments on. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity there. Through the Canning Bridge precinct, again, similar, it's an older area that they've increased the scheme heights and the densities. There is a lot of rezoning going on, and I know the state government is kind of putting the axe to a lot of red tape. So this is stimulating that demand. I would say if you are a developer looking at those markets, the boat has probably sailed. You don't want to be the last into those markets. You want to be the first in, first out. So I personally are focusing on the markets that are the bread and butter, that haven't had the rezoning, that haven't had the increase in density. And just because there's more steady demand there now, there's more people actively going into those markets and buying, and the prices of the land hasn't been bid up by the fact it's rezoned. So they're the opportunities that I see.
Yeah,
in infill. Apartment development, caveat on that, similar to what Daniel said, quite soft. It's improved, but there is no urgency for off the plan sales. People can't see price growth. They haven't seen it for 5 years. They don't want to be putting their deposits down on price growth.
Yeah. So land.
Land, infill, villas, similar to what everyone else has been saying.
Yeah, excellent. Sean says he needs to get smuggled out of Victoria over to Perth. I think a lot of people want to get smuggled out of Victoria.
I'm talking about 6 years of depressing times.
Right. It was your moment. 2020 was your moment, and unfortunately, your guys went, oh my goodness. But I said, I think what I notice and what I'm hearing from everyone is that, I mean, when initially it all sort of hit, everyone sort of froze a bit and went, we don't know how to deal with this. This is not economic. This is something that we've never come across before in our modern world, well, at least in the 20th century. But it got to a level where we're, all right, we're still okay. We're still okay. And you adjust to a new level of norm and go, all right, what can we still do in this current market? Because we still need to live somewhere. We're still growing. We're still, our needs are still there for living in whatever it is that we need to. So I'd be keen to hear from each of you where you feel, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but where you feel the opportunities are, and we're in a community of developers and buyers, investors, and where the opportunities are to be able to look out for, and that you're seeing, all right, in the next 6 to 12 months, I think this is going to be where the buying is happening. I know it's a bit of a crystal ball type thing, but where the trends are, and Kent sort of alluded to that. So maybe I'm going to start with the Vins, and who's going to speak here?
I guess I'll go for it. That's okay. Look, I mean, I think for us, from a, what sort of, do you want me to sort of talk about locations, or do you want to talk about where the real benefits are going to be over the course of the next 12 months from a developer perspective?
Because, let's do the latter.
Okay. Well, look, in particular across the lower and upper North Shore regions, when we were putting together sites, so amalgamating 5, 6, 7 properties together, the deals were generally quite heavily geared in the vendor's favor, because they had some land that had been rezoned. It's in an area where there's not a lot of opportunity, and developers were having to really come to the party and put some good terms down, and to try and win that business, because there was a lot of competition. Whereas what we're finding now is that where the vendors had quite an emotional attachment there, they're now seeing that something like COVID, which is unprecedented, can happen at any sort of moment, they're now having to put their commercial hat on. So for a developer, over the next 12, 18 months or so, we really feel that, more feasible, suitable terms can be agreed with vendors. Vendors will be a little bit more open-minded to essentially protect that deal, which 9 times out of 10 involves a significant uplift in their value. And we think that there's going to be good negotiation there. For example, we've sold sites in the past where COVID has impacted the pre-sales off the plan quite significantly. Now, going back, renegotiating a little bit of an extension for those 6 months of lost opportunity, whilst the market's been a little bit of a struggle from that side. Again, vendors are granting extensions there and saying, look, we understand it's not exactly the developer's fault to have to foot, I guess, overall the burden that's been this COVID. So I think for developers, great time to get into the market, negotiate some good terms, and most likely be able to build in some flexibility into their option agreements or whatever style agreement they're looking to move into.
Excellent. And is that because vendors are realizing as well that there may not be as many buyers as they previously had?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Cheryl, you're in the game as well, yourself. Exactly how many buyers were there and everybody fighting over anything. I mean, 2016 times 17, we could just sell anything, couldn't you?
You hang it out the window and it be gone. Yeah.
Developer, it was crazy in Sydney. But now you have to be a little bit more strategic with who you're working with. There's not a whole bucket full of developers out there that can do it. As I said sort of a little bit earlier on, there's a lot of interested parties. I mean, we're getting a lot of inquiries, but whether they've got the capacity or willingness to actually put their money where their mouth is in those instances, to say, you know what, I'm going to go and do this regardless of COVID or not, is another story, really. So you're working with a select few, and vendors in Australia, it's a very savvy country when it comes to people knowing about property and where things are going. But I think that, when you get a developer that has a good track record, willing to offer a fair and reasonable deal where they can capture an uplift, that has said the vendors are having to look at it more commercially, because in the press there's just too many variables about what's happening. Everybody's got an idea. You just got to look at the deal as is on paper, I believe.
Excellent.
Mm.
Navin, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I think he made it very nice and clear about it. I don't think there's anything to add to it.
Excellent. Great team. All right, Cam, where do you think the opportunities are for developers looking to deliver some product over the next 6 to 12 months?
It's going to be difficult times in Melbourne, obviously, at the moment, but I'd probably just continue on with what we've been selling well. I think that's going to continue, because I think that stimulus, we've got another extension again, I think till mid next year. Mm-hmm. So, I really believe that sort of subdivision, small, sort of probably 3 to 8 or so townhouse sites will be really, really popular. And I think as long as they're well priced, they'll definitely keep on flying.
For townhouses, what's sort of the sweet spot in terms of price?
It depends the area. I mean, you can obviously target that first home buyer, but where if you're in a Toorak, for example, or your Camberwells, you're completely different price points, as I'm sure there is in every single state. So it's just I guess what each developer is comfortable with, really. I think there's going to be buyers in all areas. We've got a pretty big range of different sites, from sort of your small maybe $500,000-$600,000 properties, and sort of going up into your millions as well. So yeah, just I think it's going to be interesting times going ahead, but definitely just going on from what we're doing at the moment. I really believe it's going to be that townhouse and that land subdivision.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
As far as areas, there's not really too many areas. I mean, we do quite a bit in the southeastern suburbs, and we've sort of got quite a bit up sort of the western north of Melbourne as well, as far as the land subdivision is concerned. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But anything Bayside, anything that sort of 15-kilometre radius of the city is always going to be sought after. Yeah,
awesome. So you sell the raw sites as well, or DA approved?
Correct. Yeah. So we actually we've got been having quite a bit of success with the raw sites, mainly townhouses. There's not too many apartment sites that we're sort of moving at the moment. But yeah, look, there's quite a few townhouse sites that we're we're sort of selling as well.
Excellent, good stuff. Thank you, Daniel. What are the opportunities there for investors, buyers in Brisbane Vegas?
So I think Brisbane's always been. I noticed there's a lot of developers from Sydney and Melbourne that are always looking in Brisbane, and I think obviously that's because of the price, the affordability, where you can get a splitter block or a decent development site in Brisbane, quite near the city, for under $1 million, where obviously in Melbourne and Victoria that probably would be quite difficult. I'd have to echo what Arvin said in regards to, I guess, the one buyer segment that probably reduced a little bit during COVID more than others was developers. Obviously, if you're buying your home, they don't really care that much about the value. A lot of buyers, they're buying their home, it's a personal thing. But if you're a developer, it's all about the figures. So a few developers, quite a lot of developers probably, were a little nervous about what's happening, which has, I guess, opened up it made it a bit easier for people to find development sites that might have been really hotly contested before. So, there are still a lot of splitter blocks in Brisbane. Your standard 800 square metre, 1,000 square metre, already on 2 titles. So, essentially you don't even have to do a DA. there's a lot of them lying around, and those obviously they get snapped up very quickly, but those are always a good opportunity. And obviously with the homeowner grant and all of the things that the government's putting in place now to spur people on, to build and renovate, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity with a lot of the older, the high-set Queenslanders going, rather than land development, going down the pathway of, maybe buying a really old property on a nice block, lifting it up, building it out underneath. If you drive through Kedron, which is a suburb that I focus on, every other house is, they say it's getting grey washed because every other house is getting renovated and painted in that Hamptons grey and white colour. So the whole suburb is just, you can go down any street and you'll pick 5 or 6 of these houses. So that's happening a lot in Brisbane as well.
Yeah. I had an investment property in Kedron. Sold it just before the floods. So good timing there, but great location. And it's, splitter blocks in Brisbane in particular are in such a high demand. The thing is getting it to stack up, obviously. That's
the problem is vendors that own a splitter block, someone's told them, oh, you're so lucky you own a splitter block, and suddenly they think it's worth $2 million.
Yeah.
When realistically, it's got to stack up. Even if they'll have a splitter block where the 2 individual blocks of land are worth 400 apiece, and they want $1 million for it, and it just doesn't make sense. So that is the problem. But at the end of the day, if they want to sell, then eventually they'll see sense and they'll come to a realistic price. But it is definitely an issue. They think it's worth a lot more than it is.
Yeah. Vendors thinking their properties are worth more than it is. I haven't heard of that before.
That is literally the bane of my existence.
Development sites and vendors' expectations. Goodness me. Cam, a question from Sean. Are you seeing much demand for Bendigo or Ballarat at the moment?
Definitely. So those regional towns. I saw something, I think it was on Domain only yesterday, possibly, that Bendigo was like number 2 of regional places in Victoria where people sort of want to go. So yeah, look, I definitely agree. We've got, we've sort of had a few sites in Bendigo as well, and they get snapped up really quickly. So yeah, whoever asked that question, yes.
Nice stuff. So we're all heading to Bendigo. Good stuff.
Cam, can I ask a question? With the second wave of COVID and everything that's happening in Melbourne, have you seen an effect on property prices? Because obviously that's what everyone's scared about up here, is the second wave, everything going to lockdown and then getting more of a hit on the prices.
Not a great deal because at this stage, look, as I said, sort of that first week and a half, it went really, really quiet. So I guess there was no real prices at all because nothing was really happening at all. But look, there's always going to, everyone's going to ask for a discount, whether it's a developer or an end user. You've just got to sort of show, the benefit. This is not going to last forever. I know that we haven't been through anything like this before, but that's really the message that we've got to get across. But as far as those 10, 20, 30%, no, I don't think anyone's experienced that anywhere. And if we haven't, then the other states definitely haven't. So no, I don't think it's been impacted as much as what the lovely media always tends to do, or to say.
That's what sells not newspapers, but at least advertising. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Excellent. Kent, I don't want to leave you out, but I know you covered a few things. Did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing is just be, if you're looking in WA, just be cautious of the vacuum that will happen. My view is a vacuum will happen after the stimulus stops. There is a lot of buy demand coming forward. So, the markets that I'll be looking in is anything in excess of 750 to 1.1 million end sale, because I feel that that's a market that, as the first home buyers come in, buy 400 to 500 stock, it releases the trader up market to buy stuff that's 600 price point plus, and 750 is where the grant money ends primarily. So I think that the market I'd be operating in my view, reflecting on, or the market I want to be moving into, is that 750 and above. The 1.2 and up, 1.5 and up, that has actually seen a bit of activity and growth in Perth, particularly in those northern coastal areas. So I think there could be some opportunity in that 1.2 to 750 range.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen, all very, very much for your time, your input, sharing what's happening. It's really good to be able to see that we haven't been smashed around too much. It's fun times, and if it was a time to really show the amount of grit that we have as a community, and that Australians still love property, like whatever it is, like there's still people that are out there. So thanks very much. If anyone needs, what I'm going to do is get all your contact details as well. So if anyone needs to be talking to any of you about whether it's selling, it's buying, whatever, if that's okay, I'm going to pop that on the Facebook. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Be well. Thank you. Great session, great info. We've got a few fans here. Nice work. Matt White. Woohoo, Cam. Go Melbourne. Get the first home buyers and crush it. Affordable houses and first home buyers. Go Cam. Cam, you've got all your cheerleaders here.
I invited everyone. Didn't you know that,
That's
Cheryl?
right.
I think my mum's on there too somewhere. So
I wouldn't be surprised. Excellent.
They're not allowed to go out, so they got nothing else.
They
to
gotta
do.
watch.
Exactly
They gotta
right.
watch. Yeah,
Exactly right.
I had my mom at one of my lives once, and she's like, "Hello." It was great. Adam. Oh, that's it. One last question. How do you think the market affects once these government's financial stimulus packages are over by the end of the year, and the effect on the property market? I think that was something that you addressed, Ket, before. So probably seeing more, it was about the things that are happening in Cam's world, because I think you mentioned they're extending it to the end of mid next year.
Mid 2021, I think. Yeah, it's been extended by a further 3 months. They announced. So yeah, interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I'd obviously it's going to have some form of impact, because at the end of the day, it's $25,000.
Yeah.
But I think we have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If I can give a better answer than that at the moment.
We will have to wait and see. Thanks, guys. Go Sydney. Absolutely. I might have to hit you guys up for some sites too soon. So keep the good ones for me. Excellent. Good night, everyone. We
Night, everyone.
will
Nice to meet
see
you
you
all, guys.
all again soon. And ciao. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.